Hi, good morning everyone. Welcome to Master's Teach. And today we are going to discuss about the social studies. Okay, in which the topic mentioned here in your syllabus copy. Okay, see solar energy, isolation, temperature, and its meaning. So, terrestrial radiation, polar region, etc. We'll discuss one by one. Okay, if you are newly watching my channel, please do subscribe and share with your friends. So let us start with the presentation so that that will be helpful to you. So solar energy and climate basics. So it is prepared on the basis of SCERT Telangana textbooks. Okay, from 6th standard to 10th standard. So let us have introduction to solar energy. See, uh, here the sun, the main source of energy. Okay, uh, here the sun is the main source of energy on the earth. It shapes the weather, climate, ocean currents, and support all life through photosynthesis and heat. Okay, we'll see why solar energy is important for us. Okay, here it drives all the weather and climate system needed for plant growth and through photosynthesis. It is drives for water cycle through evaporation, helps control its temperature and seasons. So it affects wind patterns and ocean currents. So they may ask why solar energy important for us. So which drives all the weather and climate system. It also helps the plants growth uh, through photosynthesis. Then so it drives the water cycle through evaporation. So adds temperatures. It controls the temperature, affects wind patterns and ocean currents. Okay, isolation and incoming solar radiation. So, what is isolation? So, isolation is the amount of sunlight the Earth's surface gets per unit area. Okay, so it is a main cause of temperature differences around the world. So, the isolation is like angle of the sun rays. So direct rays are stronger, the slanted rays spread out over a large area and they become weaker. So and at the same time the duration of sunlight. So more more daylight means more heat. So this changes the latitude and season. Then distance from the sun. So earth is the closest to the sun in the month of January, that is called as perihelion, and the furthest the long in July, that is called aphelion. Okay, you should remember this. Sometimes they are asked in which month and the sun is this earth is close to sun. So in the January, that name near distance called as perihelion, and the furthest the long in the month of July, that is called as aphelion. Okay, then atmospheric conditions. So clouds, dust, water vapor block uh, and reflect the sunlight before it reaches to the ground. This is about the isolation, incoming solar radiation. So how the distribution of this isolation on earth in the equator. So the maximum isolation, it is in vertical rays, happens in tropics. So high isolation uh, year around, whereas temperature moderate isolation in seasonal, whereas in poles minimum isolation oblique rays. So isolation decreases from the equator to poles because the sun rays hit the earth at a large angle. So the energy spreads over a large area and the rays passes through more of the atmospheric. Okay, so temperature and definition factors. So temperature is how hot or cold a place is. So we can say the temperature is hot and cold. How we can say? Through temperature, which is measured in Celsius, okay, or in Fahrenheit. Okay, so it changes because of the several location and weather factors. So it may be latitude, altitude, distance from the sea, winds and ocean currents. So latitude, so temperatures get lower from the equator to the poles as the sunlight become less direct. Whereas altitude, so temperatures 6.5 Celsius per 1,000 meters of height normal lapse the rate. Okay, then distance from the sea, so places near the coast have milder temperature, whereas inland places have bigger extremes. So winds and ocean currents, so warm currents make coastal area warmer, cold currents makes them cooler. So that's the thing. Then a measurement of temperature. So how the measurement of temperature takes place. So what is the instruments are used? One is maximum thermometer and minimum thermometer. How they keep in that Stevenson screen. Okay, maximum thermometer, it shows the highest temperature of the day. Minimum temperature thermometer, it shows the lowest temperature of the day. So both are kept in Stevenson screen at the weather stations. So you should remember this thing. Okay, so units of measurement, how the temperature is measured. One is Celsius. Okay, used in India and other most of the countries, whereas Fahrenheit, which is used in the USA. So the conversion of Fahrenheit into Celsius is like this: Fahrenheit is equal to uh, Celsius into 9 by 5 plus 32. So this is the conversion thing. Sometimes they may ask in the TET examination weather station recording. Though, so weather station they use the uh, Stevenson screen, okay, to record the temperature. Okay, then the temperature is measured 4 times a day at the weather station. The data used for the daily temperature and to study climatic pattern over the time. So the daily range is the difference between the highest and lowest temperature. The annual range is the difference between the hottest and coldest months. You should remember the same. Okay, then these things I have taken from the Telangana textbooks. Okay, terrestrial radiation and heat balance. So terrestrial radiation is the heat given off by the Earth's surface after absorbs sunlight, unlike solar radiation, which in short wave. So terrestrial radiation is made long waves. So heat balance of Earth. So Earth stays in balance when the heat gets from sunlight equal heat. It loses by radiation and reflection. So this helps the keep average temperature steady. Then greenhouse effect. So gases like carbon dioxide, the CO2, water vapor, and methane trap the heat in the atmosphere and warm the earth like a greenhouse trapping the heat. So this is important for life, but too much causes global warming. Okay, so there is a heat zones of the earth. Okay, it is divided into three zones. Then torrid zone, temperate temperate zone, then frigate zone, then torrid zone. It is 23.5 Celsius degrees and north minus 23 0.5 uh, thing. So maximum heat, vertical hottest. Okay, there is a thing. Then we'll check here. Here temperature zone 23.5 degrees minus 65 0.5 degrees in moderate heat, less oblique rays and moderate climate. Then freeze zone, it is a 66.5 minus 90s, okay, 90s degrees. So minimum heat, very oblique rays, extremely cold. So Earth is divided into three heat zones based on the angle of the sun rays. The zones are marked the tropic cancers and Capricorn and Arctic and Antarctic cycles. So heat zones here, uh, torrid zone. So between the 23.5 degrees in north and 23.5 degrees in south. So gets the direct sun rays. So it is the hottest zone on earth. It includes the tropical rainforest and deserts. Then temperature zone between 23.5 degrees and 66.5 degrees in both hemispheres. So has a mild climate with the four seasons. So it is the most populated zone. Then frigid zone. So between 66.5 degrees and 90 degree uh, in both hemispheres, gets very slanted sun rays. So it is extremely cold and covered with the snow and ice. So the boundaries of heat zones are marked uh, four lines altitude: tropic Cancer, tropic Capricorn, Arctic Circle, and Antarctic Circle. Okay, solar region and Arctic and Antarctic. So the location of the Arctic, the north pole region, it is above 66.5 degree in north, mostly frozen uh, ocean surrounded by land. Okay, then Antarctic, it is the south pole region. It is below 66.5 in south. Continent covered a thick ice. So the climate feature is that very low temperature, as low as minus 83 Celsius in the Antarctic. So permanent snow and ice cover. Okay, whereas midnight sun, midnight sun, it is 6 months of non-stop sunlight, and polar night, 6 months of non-stop darkness. This is about the polar regions and Arctic and Antarctic. Then polar life in polar region. So there are animals, plants, and humans. So what is the polar region? Animals, they have polar bears, penguins, seals, uh, walruses, and Arctic foxes. We survive with the cold, thick of fur and fat. Okay, plants only mosses and lynches and short shrubs grow in a tundra area. So trees cannot grow because the ground stays frozen and the conditions very harsh. Humans, so in suit. So the Arctic have adapted the polar life with the warm clothing, igloos, and hunting is there. Okay, then interrelationship of uh, concept: solar energy, the sun gives off the energy. Isolation, so earth get the solar energy, whereas temperature, the surface warms and based on isolation. Climate is a long-term temperature pattern and season. So this sign shows that how solar energy main cause of climate changes. The amount of isolation, earth gets surface temperature, which then shapes the climate, seasons, human life, and different parts of the world. So impact of the seasons on human life. Seasons, so what happened? So earth tilts changes the sunlight, creating four seasons in temperature areas and wet and dry seasons in tropical areas. Agriculture, through temperature and sunlight time directly affects crop types, growing seasons, and farm output, etc. Human settlement, so climate shapes clothing, housing, food habits. So where people live with different heat zones. Okay, so let us have summary the concept at a glance. Solar energy. It is the sun is the main source of energy. It drives weather, climate, and uh, life on Earth. Isolation. So sunlight reaching Earth affected by angle and uh, length of day, distance, and the atmosphere. Then temperature changed by latitude, height above sea level, distance from the sea and ocean currents, and winds measured in Celsius or Fahrenheit. Then terrestrial radiation. So heat sent out by Earth keeps heat balanced. So this basis of the greenhouse effect. So heat zones, terride, temperate, frigid, based on latitude and angle of the sun rays. Then polar region. So Arctic and Antarctic is very cold, so it's covered with ice with 6 months day or night. So the cycles special life forms. So let us have some of the MCQs. I have given 10 MCQs. The main source of energy for the Earth is it moon, is it sun, is it wind or coal? So the main source of energy is the sun. Isolation is the highest at. Is it at poles? Is it temperature zones? Or is it equator or Antarctic? So isolation is the highest at the equator. So the temperature drops with the heights at the rate of. Many times it is asked in the TET examination. A 3.5 for Celsius or 1000 meters, and 6.5 Celsius by 1000 meters, and 10 Celsius by 1000 meters, or 1 Celsius by 1000 meters. The right answer is, as the height goes, the temperatures like 6.5 C for 1000 meters. So the terroride zones between, okay, 0 to 66.5 degrees, or 23.5 in northern and 23.5 at southern. So is it 66.5 or 90 degrees or 30 degrees to minus 30 southern? So the right answer is 23.5 north and 23.5 uh, minus 23.5 at southern. So this is the thing. Then the answer is this one. Terrestrial radiation is made up of short waves, ultraviolet rays, long waves, and X rays. The right answer is long waves. So the greenhouse effect mainly caused by oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen. The greenhouse effects mainly caused by carbon dioxide. So which tool records the highest temperature of the day? It is the barometer, maximum thermometer, hydrometer, anemometer. The right answer is the the tool highest record temperature of the day is a maximum thermometer. The frigid zone is between, okay, 23.5 to 66.5 degrees, and 0 to 23.5 degrees, or 66.5 to 90 degrees, or 30 degrees to 60 degrees. The right answer is 66.5 degrees to 90. It is a frigid zone. So instead people live in which area? Amazon, Sahara, Arctic region, or temperature range zone? The right answer is Arctic region. Okay, Earth is the closest to the sun in the month of July, March, January, or September. So Earth is closest to the sun in the month of January. Okay, quick revision what we are learned today. Isolation. It is a what is isolation? Sunlight energy received by the Earth, that is called as isolation. Terrestrial radiation, so heat given off by Earth's surface. Then perihelion, so Earth is closest to the sun, that is in January. Aphelion, so Earth is farthest from the sun in the month of July. Then normal lapse rate, temperature falls by 60.5 Celsius for every 1,000 meters up. This is the important point. Greenhouse effect. So heat trapped by gases in the air. So the key facts you have to remember: terrorite zone 23.5 degrees at north to 23.5 degrees at south. Temperature zone, so 23.5 degrees to 66.5 degrees, both hemispheres. Then frigid zone 66.5 to 90 degrees, both hemispheres. Then Antarctica lowest temperature minus 83 Celsius, whereas temperature unit 0 Celsius in India, whereas Fahrenheit in USA. Conversion Fahrenheit to uh, equal to like uh, Celsius into 9.9 by 5 plus 32. This is a formula conversion of Fahrenheit into Celsius. So polar day night 6 months each. So important terms you have to remember: solar radiation term. Isolation means sunlight energy received, whereas albedo, how much Earth's surface reflects radiation, heat transfer through waves. So temperature terms. So isotherm, a line joining the equal temperature, that is called as isotherm. Then diurnal range. So change the temperature every day, that is called diurnal range. Then annual range, changes in temperature in 1 year. Okay. Then climate zone, there is a tundra, then permafrost, midnight sun. Tundra, so cold, treeless land near the poles, whereas permafrost, ground that stays frozen all year. Then midnight sun, it is a 24 hours sunlight near the poles. So memorize these things, that will be helpful to you to get the more marks. So this is how the solar energy to climate. One is isolation, which affects through angle of the sunlight, duration and atmosphere. Then temperature is the latitude, altitude and sea distance. Heat zones, toroid, temperature and frigid. Terrestrial radiation, heat balance, greenhouse effect. Then polar region, Arctic, Antarctic and which is extremely cold. The seasons life, like agriculture, settlements and clothing. So this is the solar energy. So all the main geography area in module from solar energy. So this main link help you to both concept and application questions in TET examination. So revise this particular watch this particular video again and again. Okay, practice previous papers. So focus on like heat zones, isolation factors, temperature factors, greenhouse effects. These are the important topics. So thank you for watching. We'll meet with the uh, nice presentation with the next concept for the Telangana DSC and TET. So thank you for watching. We'll meet tomorrow same time. Thank you.